when Mary Jo Hughes first approached me to work on this basketry exhibit, I got very excited and passionate about it because my grandmother Mariah also made things by hand, and she made caribou and moose hair tuftings, mucklucks, gauntlets, moccasins, and she was very well known within her own circles. But much of her work, like the grandmother's baskets here in the exhibit, went unrecognized and unacknowledged. And so she was my biggest inspiration in this exhibit, and I really feel like I've carried her throughout this process as well. My mentor and teacher, Andrea Walsh, she gave this exhibit its name, We Carry Our Ancestors. And after I had finished speaking to Mary Jo about the possibilities of this exhibit, I began to do research in the library upstairs in our classroom. And one of the first few books that I pulled out of the library, one of them had a picture of my grandmother on the front cover. And inside the book was numerous Indigenous artists, and one of them was my sister. And they were asked to submit a photo of one of the relatives that inspired them the most in their artistic practice. And she chose my grandmother, Mariah.
Oh, lovely.
You know, these baskets have been in the vault for many years. And it's been so wonderful to have them out in the open and have people gather around them. And I often think of these baskets as grannies as well, grandmothers, you know, ancestors, you know, that have their own stories to tell, and that they probably love the visiting going on and all the talking going on around them, right? Like I love them. So, the baskets are a lot like the grandmothers and ancestors.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to add that about maybe 2 months ago, preparing for this show, I was looking for a receipt of Robert Aller's. He bought a hat off Lena Jumbo, and I was searching for the receipt in his file we have upstairs in our filing cabinets. And I pulled out these photographs of Cree children in Manitoba preparing a Christmas exhibit called A Cree Bethlehem. So finding my dad, I found pictures in that file, in Robert Aller's file upstairs, and I was very excited to see that we had some documentation of the other photos and paintings created by the children in that school. I had never seen them before, so seeing the other paintings was just so incredible. And there was a group of little boys surrounded by Robert Aller, and I took a picture for my mom and dad, and I sent it home to them to look at. And a few hours later, my mom sent me a message, and she said, do you know which one's your dad? And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that my dad's actually in this picture. I've never seen any photos of my dad. And in the picture, the kids are all surrounding a piece of art they're looking at, and they're all smiling with Robert Aller looking at the art. And so that was just such a beautiful picture. And I was very, very surprised that my dad was in the photo. And when I look at it, oh, that kind of looks like me, you know, like when I was that age, you know, like I could see the resemblance. And so that was very, very precious. And it just made me realize that, you know, we do carry our ancestors wherever we go. And I feel very grateful and blessed that I can say that and believe it and know it to be true in my own life. So
ancestors are very present in the present. And you ask about those relationships with family. If ancestors are present in the present, then that means a view of time where the past is not receding, the past is not irrelevant. It's very much part of contemporary lived experience. And to the extent that the past is part of contemporary experience, the future becomes very relevant too. If we are with our ancestors now, we also are ancestors to people in the future.
Yeah.
It encourages a way of thinking about the future and caring about the future in a way which is very, very different from the linear timeline, where the future is off there and where the past is down there.
Yeah.
And by the same token, it encourages a respect between generations, so that somebody who is old, however one wants to define that, I define it later and later as time goes on, but someone who is old carries this knowledge of lived experience with them into the present, and that's very, very important, rather than carrying the knowledge of a time when, for instance, the internet didn't exist, so in what way is their experience at all relevant to us? It's a very different way of viewing the family members and generations.
I also assisted Dr. Andrea Walsh in the curation of an exhibit called There's Truth Here. And in this exhibit, my father had a painting that he had created in residential school in 1960 under the tutelage of Robert Aller. This painting is more than just a painting to me and my family. It's very, very, very precious to us. It hangs in our dining room in my mom and dad's house. And it just serves as a reminder of the types of experiences and life stories, of my own father and his family, and what it was like to go to residential school and then to come home, and then having to adjust to a whole other different way of living away from your family. And it also represents to me the love that never died for many of these children, including my dad. It never died. He loved his parents, and he hung on to those feelings while he was at the school. Sad as it sounds, but he just continued to never forget, who he was and where he came from. And you see that a lot in the paintings in the collection. They're pictures of the land, people's homes, their families. So I think the paintings tell very important stories by children who were in those schools.
Yes.
I think a lot of people forget that we're all connected, and that when one piece is not working, it affects the whole.
Yeah.
And so part of my responsibility, I feel, at this stage in my life is to help bring these stories out, because they're healing and they're medicine for our people. And it's important that we tell them in our own ways.